When consciousness begins to awaken, it doesn't arrive with fireworks or heavenly choirs. It drifts in softly, like dawn light slipping beneath a closed door. Suddenly, everything appears the same. The scent of coffee, the hum of the streets, laughter and tears flowing as they always did. Yet something within you has changed. A new space opens. A stillness hums between your thoughts. Infinity breathes quietly inside the ordinary. And oh, the impulse to share it. The heart, trembling with revelation, wants to run into the world shouting, "You don't understand. Everything is all right. It always was." It feels as if life has stopped being a maze and revealed itself as a garden. Yet the moment you try to speak it, words collapse under the weight of what they cannot hold. How can you pour the ocean into a teacup and expect it to make sense? Words can only gesture toward the truth. They cannot contain it. You can say light, but the word won't illuminate. You can say love, but the sound won't embrace. You can say God, yet your lips will never touch the infinite. That's why those who awaken learn eventually to speak less and listen more, not out of pride, but reverence. Silence becomes their native tongue. Because the awakened understand that to describe the dawn to someone still asleep is futile. Light means nothing to closed eyes. Every soul has its own sacred clock, and the alarm rings only when consciousness is ready to wake. The timing is divine. The experience of awakening is itself an act of surrender. The you that longs to explain is the same you that dissolved moments ago. Yet the mind, persistent as a tide, rushes to preserve the memory of its own disappearance. It's almost humorous, the ego trying to archive its own ending. But real awakening is simpler than any philosophy. It's like wind moving through the leaves. You don't see it, but you feel its motion, and that feeling, vast, unbounded, peaceful, refuses to be translated. What you witnessed was never yours to claim. It was life seeing itself through you, the universe glancing at its own reflection and smiling. In that realization, time folds in on itself. The past dissolves, the future evaporates, and separation begins to look like an old dream. You realize there is no you watching life. There is only life watching. The divine breathes through your lungs, sees through your eyes, and whispers, "I am." Try to explain that to someone and watch how language betrays you. They'll nod politely, maybe even smile, but their minds will turn it into poetry, not truth. They'll hear the words, but not the silence between them. And it's in that silence where everything is revealed. So the wise ones remain quiet, not because they wish to hide the treasure, but because they know every soul must touch the sacred with its own hands. Awakening isn't taught, it's remembered. How could you teach someone the flavor of rain or the sound of eternity breathing within them? Those who try to share their enlightenment often find themselves tangled in a new illusion, the illusion of being someone who knows. That's the ego's final disguise, shimmering with spiritual language. It whispers, "Now you understand, now you are special." Yet awakening doesn't make anyone special. It dissolves the need to be special. When the mind tries to explain what is beyond it, it weaves a new cage out of golden words. Beautiful, yes, but still a prison. True freedom comes when even the urge to explain dissolves into stillness, when silence itself begins to speak, and it does speak, eloquently. In that silence lies the real abundance, the deep peace that doesn't depend on anything. It is the wealth of the soul, the harmony between being and universe, the quiet gratitude that flows without asking. In silence, existence itself becomes a blessing, and life a meditation. But don't mistake this awakening for the end of the road. It is only a threshold, a door opening to a vast journey. And just beyond that doorway waits another discovery that what worked for you, what revealed the light within you, might not be the key for anyone else. There is a quiet humility that dawns after the first flash of awakening. the recognition that the key that opened your door was cut for your lock alone, the practice that seemed to dissolve your walls, the mantra you loved, the posture that steadied your breath, the guided meditation that felt like a stairway into inner peace. These were not universal formulas. They were weather meeting a particular landscape. A method is a conversation between the mystery and one person's hunger. Teach the words to another mouth, and the meaning goes missing. Think of it like music. The melody that undid your heart arrived in a certain key because that is where your life was tuned, your history, your silences, your wounds, your hope. Ask another to sing in that same key, and you might watch them strain and falter, assuming the song is wrong when, in truth, the instrument needs a different tuning. Transformation doesn't happen because a technique is impressive. It happens because the soul was ripe enough to hear it. That is why the saints whisper about timing and why the poets bow to mystery. Of course, the mind loves instructions. The success mindset it adopts for work and wealth wants a checklist for enlightenment as well. Do this breath, hold this mudra, repeat this sacred syllable, follow the spiritual laws like a spreadsheet, and voila, instant abundance. But awakening does not take orders from our calendars. The law of attraction misread becomes a form of spiritual control, an attempt to bargain with eternity. When that happens, the power of the mind turns into a loop, and manifestation hardens into a hunt for outcomes. The river will not be negotiated with. It will only be surrendered to. Gratitude, then, is not a tactic. It's the fragrance of seeing clearly. Inner wealth is not acquired. It is uncovered. What worked for you worked because it met you where the pain was knotted, a particular ache, a private history. Perhaps your solar plexus felt like a clenched fist, and a simple attention to breath softened it. Perhaps your heart, like an old temple bell, finally rang when you placed your faith. Trembling but true in the possibility of harmony. Someone else might not be contracted there at all. Their chakras are telling a different story. How could one path be the path when every life is a library of unrepeatable pages? So the wise become careful with prescriptions. They know prosperity can be an atmosphere of being rather than a ledger of having. They know abundance often arrives when one no longer bargains for it. They refuse to convert their journey into a product, their blessings into a template. Even the language of financial unblock can slip into superstition if we forget. Blockages melt where love learns to look. True spirituality is not a vending machine. It is a vow to remain available to the real. The moment a method is idolized, the idol quietly demands sacrifice, usually your freedom. This is not a rejection of form. Form is a beautiful servant. Rituals, prayers, invocations, the warm cadence of guided meditation, the patient naming of the chakras. Each can be a cradle for spiritual energy, a way the body says yes to the unseen. But forms must remain transparent, like windows, not become mirrors where the ego rehearses its holiness. The moment the path is used to decorate the traveler, the journey pauses. The costume is admired while the soul waits by the door, shoes in hand, smiling. When people ask, "What did you do to awaken?" they are often asking for certainty. They want a map that avoids embarrassment, failure, and the rawness of not knowing. But maps, if clutched too tightly, become blindfolds. A map can point to a desert. It cannot place sand between your toes. And even two deserts are not the same. Wind redraws the dunes nightly. The expansion of consciousness isn't a highway with signage. It's a living topography that rearranges itself in response to every honest step. You may feel the urge to share your methods out of love, and sometimes silence is the deepest love. Not the silence of withholding, but the silence that refuses to steal another person's discovery. There is a sacred ecology to awakening. Each soul must hear the river inside them, must feel the rip of the current against their own ribs, must learn the rhythm by touching it. To hand them your rhythm is to drown out the music already rising in their chest. Co-creation with the universe relies on that intimacy, a listening so loyal that advice becomes unnecessary. Notice how the mind tries to market what moved you. It wants to brand the ineffable, to promise quick prosperity, to transform life purpose into a program, to sell hope as if hope were a commodity. But hope is the sky at midnight. It doesn't need your roof. Faith, too, isn't a badge. It's an atmosphere, a quiet equilibrium in which you trust the pathless path because walking itself feels like a blessing. Balance returns when the heart stops negotiating and starts noticing. Harmony arrives when we no longer demand a soundtrack. If you must speak, speak like rain, precise, unpossessive, gone as soon as it falls. Offer not a method, but a metaphor, not a recipe, but a reminder. Tell them the sea cannot be memorized and that the shoreline moves every hour. Remind them that the spiritual life is not an exam to pass, but a door that hinges inward. Say that enlightenment isn't a summit, it's the clearing of fog from a field that was always there. And when gratitude rises without a reason, bow. For abundance is visiting without needing a name tag. There is, after all, an exquisite justice to the way the universe teaches. It refuses to skip anyone's turn at the wheel. The laws that matter most are not slogans. They are patterns woven through everything, spiritual laws that the body recognizes before the brain does. When your breathing trusts them, the mind follows. When your eyes soften, the world looks back as if it had been waiting. That is manifestation without manipulation, a prosperity of presence, a wealth that counts in moments, not coins. So keep your methods like a candle, cupped in the wind. Warm your own hands and let the light spill where it may. The journey is intimate. The path reveals itself to souls that touch the ground, not to mouths that repeat directions. Share the fragrance of your freedom, not the formula you once used to find the door. In that fragrance, others will find their own key, shaped by their own questions, cut by their own seasons, faithful to their own becoming. And then another tenderness appears. As the fog thins, you begin to see people with startling clarity. Masks look translucent. Stories wear their seams on the outside. The choreography of fear and defense becomes almost audible. What to do with such sight? To speak, to spare, to mirror, or to wait? When the fog begins to lift, vision sharpens, not the kind of sight that depends on eyes, but the deeper seeing that rises from silence. It's as if the veil between hearts thins, and you start to perceive the invisible architecture of people, their fears, their defenses, the places where their souls still whisper through cracks in the mask. You look at someone and sense the weight of their untold stories, the ache beneath their laughter, the trembling inside their anger, the prayers hidden behind their pride. It's beautiful, but also dangerous, because with that clarity comes the temptation to play healer, to become the one who knows. You see so clearly that you almost ache to lift the veil for them, to say, "Look, this is why you suffer. Can't you see? You're the one holding the chain." But to do so is to rob them of the sacred process that gives the chain meaning. Truth is not a gift you can give. It is a flame that each must discover within their own shadow. If you light it for them, it flickers out at the first wind. The soul must kindle its own fire, wrestle with its own darkness, fall into its own silence. You can stand nearby, yes, but you cannot carry the torch for them. There's an old wisdom hidden in nature about this, the butterfly's struggle. It must fight its way out of the cocoon so its wings may strengthen. If you help too soon, if you peel back the threads with your well-meaning fingers, the creature never learns to fly. And so it is with consciousness, the tension, the conflict, the waiting. These are not errors. They are the friction that gives shape to awakening. You may see their fear so clearly that you could name it in one word, but naming it for them would be like carving their seed open to make it grow faster. Seeds must split themselves. Compassion must trust timing. The spiritually awakened person learns this through heartbreak, the heartbreak of understanding too soon. They know the cost of premature truth. They see the faces of those who recoil when a mirror is placed before them, and the pain of watching someone retreat into denial, believing you were cruel when you were only honest. And then you learn. Honesty without readiness becomes violence. To see another clearly is a responsibility, not a license. It's not a stage to perform your insight, but a sanctuary to practice reverence. True seeing carries the tenderness of secrecy, the same tenderness with which you'd hold a bird with a broken wing. You know you cannot force it to fly, only keep it warm until its instinct returns. You begin to realize that spiritual clarity without humility becomes intrusion. The awakened eye must learn the art of looking without piercing, of understanding without interrupting. It is one thing to perceive someone's illusion, another to demand that they see it before they are ready. There is divine timing at work, always. Even the shadows are scheduled. Sometimes you sit in conversation with someone spiraling through the same story for the 1,000th time. A story stitched from pain, stitched from fear. You could tell them, you're trapped in your own narrative. But they aren't asking for truth. They're asking to be seen inside their story. And so you listen, not because you agree with the story, but because love listens. Eventually, a day comes when they pause and whisper, maybe I'm the one repeating this. And then you smile, not because you were right, but because life revealed itself without your interference. This is the patience of awakened love. It trusts the laws of spiritual growth, the way a gardener trusts the seasons. It knows that even silence can be medicine, that the energy of your presence, calm, steady, unjudging, is often a more potent teaching than your words. When you carry peace, others feel it like sunlight. You don't need to tell them what's wrong with their soil. You simply bloom in their presence, and something in them remembers how. But it takes maturity to reach that place, to resist the urge to help through correction. Ego hides in the disguise of saviorhood, whispering, you are enlightened, they are not. Show them the way. Yet this is how division sneaks back into the sacred space of unity. The mind divides even enlightenment into ranks. The awakened one knows better. There is no them. There is only consciousness unfolding itself in different disguises, different chapters of the same divine book. So you begin to walk differently, softer, slower. You stop diagnosing the world and start loving it. You stop dissecting people's pain and start trusting their strength. Your compassion becomes quieter, but wider. You no longer try to fix anyone. You simply refuse to see them as broken. And that subtle shift changes everything. It's a kind of faith not in ideas, but in evolution itself. You start noticing the hidden harmony in people's chaos, the divine choreography behind their detours. Even their mistakes begin to look sacred. Every argument, every heartbreak, every sleepless night, all of it part of a vast alchemy, refining the soul into clarity. You realize there is no wasted pain, no meaningless confusion. Life, in its strange wisdom, turns even resistance into revelation. And so the awakened eye learns to close itself, not from ignorance, but from love. To withhold an insight becomes an act of mercy, a kind of sacred patience that says, I trust your timing as much as my own. That's the quiet secret of wisdom. It knows when not to speak. For the highest form of understanding is not explanation, but presence. To sit beside someone in their storm without reaching for their umbrella, that's divine companionship. It is the unspoken reminder you are not alone in your awakening. And when you can look at another's suffering and still see their light, when you can look at their anger and still feel their innocence, when you can look at their confusion and still trust their path, that's when compassion ripens into peace. The heart that sees without judging has already entered the realm of grace, but grace, when misunderstood, can unsettle. Because when you start to see that nothing is truly solid, that even pain, even identity, even the self itself is fluid, another revelation begins to form on the horizon, a deeper, quieter mystery, where even the idea of someone dissolves. There comes a day, quiet, unannounced, when even the idea of someone begins to dissolve. The mind tries to grasp it, to turn the moment into a philosophy, but there's nothing left to hold. You look for yourself and find only movement, breath passing through lungs, thoughts drifting like clouds, the pulse of being without a boundary. It is both terrifying and magnificent. The self you defended for decades turns out to be mist, a temporary arrangement of light and memory. At first, the emptiness feels like loss. The ground gives way and the mind panics, whispering, "If there's no me, then who lives, who loves, who dreams?" It's the final tremor of the ego, mistaking dissolution for death. But slowly, something softer begins to sing beneath the fear, not a voice, but a presence, vast and tender. And you understand, the emptiness is not absence, it's the infinite space that holds everything. This is the paradox of awakening. When you stop searching for meaning, life itself becomes meaningful. You realize that form and formlessness are not enemies. The wave doesn't disappear when it recognizes it's the ocean. It continues to rise and fall, just without the burden of believing it should be permanent. That's what peace feels like. Not control, but permission. The permission to be a fleeting miracle. To glimpse this truth is to touch the edge of freedom, not the kind that rebels, but the kind that releases. You see that the universe is not built on solidity but on rhythm, a divine choreography of appearing and vanishing. Every breath is a small death followed by resurrection. Every moment is born and gone before you can name it. You are the silence watching it all unfold. And yet, this revelation can't be given away carelessly, for to someone still seeking stability, the truth of emptiness can feel like cruelty. They might hear, "Nothing is real," and mistake it for despair. But emptiness doesn't mean nothing matters. It means everything matters equally. It means that love and loss, laughter and pain, joy and grief, all shimmer with the same sacred light because all arise from the same source. The awakened ones guard this secret with compassion. They know words can bruise where silence can heal. They remember how the void once frightened them, how they once mistook vastness for loneliness. And so they speak of it gently, if at all. Not everyone is ready to discover that they are the sky, not the storm. There's a kind of holy discretion in that, a reverence for the fragility of human perception, because the truth in the wrong season can shatter more than it frees. And enlightenment isn't meant to destroy the world you live in. It's meant to reveal the divinity pulsing through it. You learn to hold both the emptiness and the form in one gaze. You wash the dishes, you pay your bills, you laugh with friends, all while knowing none of it is separate from the infinite. That is the quiet grace of awakening, doing ordinary things with an extraordinary awareness. But soon another understanding dawns, subtler still, more luminous. Once you realize there is no solid self, the walls of morality begin to soften too. Not because ethics no longer matter, but because goodness ceases to be an obligation and becomes a natural expression of unity. The unawakened world thinks morality comes from fear of punishment, fear of judgment, fear of karma. But the awakened heart acts kindly not because it should, but because cruelty feels unnatural, like trying to punch your own reflection. When you know there's no separation, love becomes instinctive. Freedom, then, is misunderstood. It's not the freedom to do anything you want. It's the freedom from wanting anything that would harm. It's the effortless alignment between wisdom and compassion. You don't follow rules, you follow resonance. You act in harmony because dissonance hurts. This is the sacred maturity of awakening, the realization that the laws of spirit are written not in books, but in the body, in the pulse that quickens when you betray yourself, in the peace that settles when your actions echo truth. To live awakened is to dance gracefully within convention while knowing it's all theater, to honor the play without mistaking it for the whole of reality. So you move through the world as an actor who remembers the script is temporary. You bow when the curtain falls, you smile at the audience, you exit the stage with gratitude. The play continues for others, and you love them too much to ruin it by shouting that it's only a play. Instead, you perform your part with sincerity, pay the bills, obey the traffic lights, hold the door open for strangers, not because you must, but because harmony is your nature now. People may misunderstand. They'll sense your calm and call it detachment. They'll feel your freedom and call it rebellion. Let them. The language of liberation can sound like madness to those who still believe the cage is protection. But you no longer argue with misunderstanding. You bless it. You've seen that everyone's confusion is part of the same awakening you once resisted. And so you walk through life quietly radiant, carrying no message but your being. You laugh more. You take nothing personally. You feel the sacred hum in the mundane, in the sound of a kettle boiling, in the weight of your breath, in the sunlight trembling through leaves. Every detail is divine because it's all made of the same essence. Consciousness at play. In time, you stop trying to awaken anyone. You see that consciousness is doing that perfectly well on its own, in its own mysterious rhythm. You are not the awakener. You are the awakening itself, happening as this face, this breath, this moment. And that's the secret that cannot be taught. There is nowhere to arrive, nothing to achieve. The destination was never a place. It was this presence, this infinite now. The universe isn't waiting for you to become enlightened. It's waiting for you to notice that you already are. So live quietly, like a candle in an open room. Let your presence do the teaching. Let your stillness be the sermon. Those who are ready will feel it, not as a thought, but as a vibration of remembrance. They'll recognize the peace within your eyes and think it's yours, not knowing it's their own reflection returning home. And if they ask what you've found, smile softly and say, nothing and everything. So, now that you've glimpsed the path behind the veil, what will you do with it? Will you let this truth become another concept to admire, or will you allow it to melt into the way you live, breathe, love, and see the world? Because awakening was never about collecting wisdom, it's about becoming it. You've seen that silence can speak louder than any sermon, that emptiness can overflow with abundance, and that peace isn't something you chase. It's what remains when you stop running. The question is, will you trust that peace? Will you let it rearrange your life from the inside out? Maybe it's time to stop seeking and start seeing, to stop talking about alignment and actually walk in harmony with your purpose. Maybe your next manifestation isn't about attracting something new, but remembering what you already are, a co-creator, an extension of divine consciousness, the very spark that the universe uses to know itself. Because real transformation doesn't happen when you learn new information, it happens when you live from revelation. When gratitude stops being a practice and becomes a pulse. When faith is no longer belief, but the oxygen of your soul. So ask yourself, what would shift in your reality if you started living as though you were already whole? What if your abundance wasn't waiting in some distant future, but sleeping quietly in your awareness, ready to awaken the moment you say yes to it? You don't need permission to live in harmony. You don't need proof to feel the blessing. You don't even need to fix what's broken. You only need to stop calling yourself broken. Because the light that once illuminated your darkness is still here, burning softly behind your eyes, waiting for your attention. And if this message stirred something inside you, a question, a longing, a quiet remembering, don't ignore it. Let it guide you. Let it become your next step toward the peace you've always carried. Stay close. There's so much more to uncover about awakening, abundance, and the mysterious beauty of your spiritual path. If you want to keep expanding this consciousness together, subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss another chapter of this sacred journey. The awakening isn't happening to you, it's happening through you, and it has only just begun.